We're now moving on to the What Fusion Needs series, and there's 4 sessions going on across the 2 stages. The first one here is looking at the people and skills, so the talent we need to deliver Fusion, and also potential routes into a career within the Fusion industry. I'm now going to hand you over to Chris Dunkley, who's the Deputy Director of the Manufacturing Technology Centre, which is a bit of a tongue twister, but over to you, Chris.
Yeah. Well, good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to those online and those sitting here in the museum with us. Welcome to the session on people and skills. So, here's the thing. If we are to deliver Fusion within the next 25 years, attraction and retention of that rare commodity that is talent is absolutely critical. So, as Stuart said, I'm Chris Dunkley from the Manufacturing Technology Centre. We're part of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult here in the UK, and we also deliver the apprenticeship programme on the Culham campus within the Oxford Advanced Skills Centre. I'm delighted that we've been able to assemble an expert panel. I'm not going to introduce them. I'm going to ask them to do that for themselves. So, as we shift, and we've heard a lot about this today, as we shift from a purely experimental R&D-led sector to a more operational commercial sector, the range and the type of skills within a broadening supply chain will be evolving over that time. So, over the next 45 minutes, we'll explore the different career pathways, the challenges to be overcome, and in such a burgeoning sector, and offer up some ideas on attracting that new talent. But first of all, I'd like to ask our panel to briefly introduce themselves and also just give a personal interest in this subject to make sure that we have the best people in the world in this industry. So, Kate, can I start with you? If you can just introduce yourself and why you're here.
Sure. So I'm Kate Lancaster. I am a lecturer at the York Plasma Institute. I'm an experimental laser plasma physicist, so I do inertial confinement fusion. I very much have skin in the game in terms of training people. Until a few weeks ago, I was the program director of the only Fusion Masters program in the UK, and also have students in the Fusion Doctoral Training Centre and on the management board. So for us, training students is one thing, and we're pretty good at that, but it's then where do they go? And seeing the landscape change over the last 10 years has been a joy for us, because there's so many different places now that our students that we train can go, including industry. So for me, I have a personal interest in terms of the next generation. So.
Okay, lovely. Jason.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Dreisbach from S&C Lavalin Atkins. Technical director for our new nuclear technologies business, which happens to include fusion. My interest here is in trying to make sure that all of the work that does need to get done to deliver fusion over the next however many years can be done, because we need more people involved. And it's not just from the graduate side of things, it's also from other industries and bringing other industries and their skills and transferring them into the fusion industry.
Okay, perfect. We'll explore that a little bit later. So, Jackie.
Hi, so I'm Jackie Diel. I'm a talent partner at Tokamak Energy. So focus on attracting and growing talent within the industry. Prior to that, I was working at UKAA as talent manager, so have worked in attracting and retaining, developing talent within the industry for a number of years now. I feel really passionate about this. It's a great area to attract people into, and as as the industry is growing, the opportunities are growing, which is it's such an easy sell, in terms of what we do and what opportunities are available. But obviously, I like the challenge of trying to sort of pull from a quite a small pool, in some niche areas. That is something that we will discuss more, I'm sure, today. But there's lots of opportunity to do that, and that's one of the reasons.
Thank you, Jackie. So that's your panel. So just before we continue, just a reminder to those people online, if you can submit your questions, we will be asking those later. So I'm going to paint sort of 3 scenarios now in terms of where people are in terms of their career and how they might actually approach coming into the fusion sector. So the first one being, if you have young people in your family, unfortunately we're not one of those, but if we have young people in our family, what advice would you give them to make them aware, excited and connected to Fusion? And particularly, what opportunities are there for school leavers to get involved? Who'd like to take that one first? Jackie, do you want to go first?
Okay, so I have young children, and they're still at primary school, but they have a real interest, in what's happening in the world already. So I know, that it starts really young. So it's really important, that we get that message across, and we engage with children from primary right through to secondary, and then into your kind of further and higher education. It's so important at such a young age, and will continue to be. In terms of kind of opportunities, so at Tokamak Energy, we've literally just launched a STEM ambassador program. Within a few hours of putting it out to the business, we had a huge sort of uptake. People are really passionate about this. They really want to help with the outreach. They really want to help spread that message and get the engagement, which was really promising. And I know there's other programs across other businesses the same. We're also just launching apprenticeship scheme and looking to sort of grow and develop that, and have been engaging with Oxford Advanced Skills and other industries to try and see where we can grow talent. So I think it's incredibly important that we give the younger generation these opportunities, and there are lots of opportunities to do that locally and and more widely. So.
Okay, Jason?
I think going back to a few of the sessions from earlier today, I would reflect on the communications piece of things and making sure that the way we communicate about the industry is something that resonates or impacts young people. And I think we were talking about it earlier in terms of hope. And young people today hear a lot of negative things. And what we want to do is try to get them to understand that being a part of the industry offers the hope to solve those problems and be a part of the solution. So I think that sort of messaging is important from a communications point of view.
Okay, Kate?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we don't tend to deal too much with school leavers in the university part, but basically in all the national labs that I've worked at, they have apprenticeship schemes, and I think I can only see the apprenticeship sector getting bigger, and I think indeed it should be, because if you get people in from a really early age working on wicked problems like fusion, they could spend their whole lives doing it. They won't have to go to university. There are so many different routes in now, rather than just going through A-levels, university, get your PhD. You don't have to do that. And so hopefully life is lumpy, and so you can get in through many different routes. So I just only advocate and encourage for more apprenticeships in this area.
Yeah, I've had the experience over at OAS talking to our apprenticeships, and they're doing level 3, level 4, so the technical, electrical and mechanical engineering. And Ian, who's speaking at the moment, Ian Chapman, CEO at UKA, gave an absolutely inspirational presentation to not only UKA apprentices, but from apprentices sponsored from right across, and it was absolutely sensational. So secondly, the second scenario I'd like to paint is if you're graduating or you're at a master's, or perhaps thinking about sort of a PhD, what are the possible opportunities for you? And I think I'll start with you, Kate, actually. It's probably your area.
Yeah, so just to sort of paint a picture. So as I said, I used to be the program leader for our Fusion MSc. We found about half the people on the program would go into PhD programs, and then half would go into a broad range of industries. I've definitely noticed an uptick in the last few years that some of those students who were going into industry are now going into fusion industry, Tokamak Energy, First Light Fusion. That makes me extremely happy. It means that we're providing really well-trained people for homegrown industries. And then the students that we take into our, so we lead the doctoral training centre that's a conglomeration of 5 universities. And those students, again, about half end up going into the fusion game, and then the other half go into a very, very broad range of areas. Again, we're seeing an uptick in those people going into fusion industry, and then companies that are interested in fusion, and they're really well trained. And so, these are really sensible routes. So I think you've got a good grounding in, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be plasma physics. I think I feel sad about it as a plasma physicist. Maybe my time is coming to an end, but maybe more effort needs to be put into training in terms of engineering, especially digital engineering, which is something that is coming to the fore in terms of being useful for designing, fusion power plants before actually building one, for example, like test it out in the digital world. So,
yeah. Jason, what's your bit?
So the one thing that I would mention is even before folks in university leave university, I would encourage them to be engaged with companies like my company or like Jackie's company to do year in industry or summer programs. Many students come through that route in our organization, and we sponsor them for their final years of university. We bring them back on board, and they're well versed in how we operate and the kinds of projects that we can get involved in. I think the other thing that I would say is when you're coming out of university, making sure you're open to different types of work, different types of opportunities. When you come into an organization like Atkins, there's a lot of other things you can get after, other industries you can transfer your skills into, and I think all of that is useful for all of the different projects that we have to deliver, whether it's fusion or not fusion.
Okay, Jackie, you got anything to add?
Definitely support what both of you said. I think also the breadth of graduate opportunities is huge now compared to what it was even just a few years ago, which is great for the industry. And it gives us an opportunity to tackle some of the other issues we have around finding skills, actually growing our own. The industry needs that. So, to enable us to do that across such a breadth of different disciplines and skills within the industry is really great. So, yeah.
Okay, and that sort of leads us into the third of those questions, really. If you're working within another related sector, perhaps in an old fossil fuel energy area, how do you make that switch, and how would you advise people going about that? Jackie, do you want to go with that?
Yeah, sure. I think it's really important to mention so many of people that enter the fusion industry haven't come from fusion, particularly on the engineering side. Literally, a huge number of different industries, whether it be aerospace or different manufacturing type industries, automotive. We've seen a huge range of different backgrounds and skills come across, and I think really it's about us, selling fusion more and explaining that there are so many transferable skills, particularly, I think, on the engineering side, but also, across business operations and some of the other areas of growth, that are coming within the industry. So I think it's really about us selling, fusion more and being out there more and being more, more out there to them.
I think there's demystifying to be done around fusion for the wider sort of technical industries. Fusion is a very complicated and difficult process to understand, but the majority of the delivery and the engineering that goes into a facility like a fusion power plant is not anything necessarily to do with fusion science. So I would say it's on the order of 30% of the work needs to be delivered on fusion. That's 70% of the work on a power plant that needs to be delivered by other disciplines that are transferable 100% completely from, like you said, the fossil industry, the fission industry, the oil and gas industry, whatever other industry, it's engineering and it's all transferable as far as I'm concerned. It's about demystifying and getting people to understand the majority of it is actually not fusion-based science stuff. It's the normal engineering that we would do in our day-to-day work.
Okay. It's worth saying as well, we're doing some work around trying to help sectors not previously involved in fusion to actually upskill themselves in the area of fusion. So we've just run, in conglomeration with UKAEA, our first 2 fusion industry schools, which were a massive success. Thanks to Howard sitting in the audience there. And we've got some really good feedback. There were sessions run to, primarily function as information sessions, but also B2B networking and so forth. So that'll help people form kind of networks that they need in order to go for bids and stuff like that, especially for things like STEPS. So these are the roles that universities even can play in these kind of games. So yeah, it's all very exciting.
Okay, we've got a question coming in from Dan Wolf. How should the public and private sector work together to grow the talent pool in the fusion sector as a whole?
I'll start. Well, one of the ways in which we do that is by joint PhDs that get funded, but also things like years in industry, internships during undergraduate, master's projects. That's really important. But there are wider collaborations to be made. Certainly, university business interaction as a whole, knowledge transfer. All of those things are super important. But obviously, this is from a very our perspective. So I'm very, very happy to hear what others have to say.
Any other perspective?
I would say the same thing. It's sort of partnering with universities, partnering with the UKAEA, sponsoring PhDs jointly with organizations like UKAEA or other organizations like that into the universities. I think my company is sponsoring master's and PhD students in New York and Sheffield universities that are not necessarily maybe plasma physics based, but are fusion adjacent sort of industries or education programs that are valuable for our company.
Okay. We're getting a few questions through now. So this a particular one is what is the strategy in levelling up the skills education opportunities in Fusion across all regions of the UK outside the Oxfordshire area? And obviously I'm aware of the strength of the Oxfordshire cluster, Fusion cluster, but also other clusters, including more industrial areas in the northwest, northeast, Scotland and Wales. Is there any views from the panel?
I asked that question earlier, not about skills, but about sharing the love in terms of economic development. It's interesting to note that there's a lot of companies in the sector that aren't based in the south that work in the sector, but obviously you can see uplift of things being cited in different areas. So STEP, for example, being in West Burton will be a massive deal, I think. In terms of skills education, like some of the main Fusion programs are not in the south, for example, at the University of York. So obviously that's good. For example, we were involved in the Gould bid, and there was discussion around university training colleges, things like that, in terms of apprenticeships and so forth. So when something like STEP comes to an area, it has the power to really uplift an area. So I would like to see more of that happen. More shift of actual physical things being cited such that infrastructure gets built around, and that gives arguments for educational development in the area, in these areas as well, because you need a business case for that. Otherwise, why would you do it?
Well, one of the things that we're looking at for the Manufacturing Technology Centre is the supply chain that actually is associated with Fusion. So, related sectors. And we know within those hotspots, within those particular strong southeast and Oxfordshire clusters, we need to have that presence right across the UK. So it's really important. Sorry, Justin,
I think one of the other things, and it's a very practical aspect of what is happening, particularly through UKAEA and other programs, is the requirement for companies like Atkins, when we're doing work for a client, we have to demonstrate that leveling up social value aspect of what we're bringing to the tender or to that bit of work. And that includes things like year in industry, apprenticeships, graduate development in the Fusion industry, but it also includes the location where our staff is and what we're doing to enhance the economy around that particular location or those locations that aren't in Oxfordshire or in the southeast particularly. So it's a very practical thing that at least government aspects, but I also think it's happening in the wider part of the industry that is being funded through the government, whether it's a Sizewell C or a Hinkley Point. There are requirements around how you develop your staffing levels in what locations and how that improves the benefit of the rest of the UK, not just the southeast particularly. So it's there. We have to deal with it.
Okay. Just in my introduction, I talked about the development of the Fusion as a cluster. And Kate, you spoke about sort of plasma physicists and what skills and what type of skills are we going to need over the next 10 to 20 years, and how's that going to change? Jackie, how are you seeing that sort of change at Tokamak?
Yeah, sure. So I think the shift from sort of the R&D more into the engineering technical challenges is definitely showing a change in some of the skills that we're looking for, particularly around sort of technical program project management. That's definitely something that's growing. around kind of looking for your magnet designers, on the cryogenic side, RF engineers. These are lots of skills, but as we move forward, also finding people with the sort of commercial skills and background, and that side of things, which isn't naturally always there with some of the, traditional people that we've looked for. So I think, that's certainly something that, we're noticing and envisaging.
Okay.
I think, from my point of view, the Fusion is moving from an R&D background to what I would term a project delivery background. You have to deliver the project now. And that's a different skill set than the plasma physicist and scientists trying to deliver a project. This is a different scale, and it goes back to what I've heard a lot from a variety of panelists over today in terms of staying in your lane and making sure that you stay in your lane. When you're a plasma physicist, you're not trying to deliver a 10 billion pound fusion power plant effectively. And so I think it's about project delivery and making sure the skills of project delivery come up so that we can manage the public funding and the private money in the right way.
Okay.
Yeah, I think from our side, plasma physics isn't going to disappear if you're relying on fusion. You will still need people to understand this stuff. Also, there's a whole, FYI, there's a whole raft of other stuff we can do with plasma, which is, don't get me started on that, just, yeah. But obviously, we're moving towards a much more engineering-dominated arena, materials-dominated arena. We haven't solved any of those problems yet, right? So, and we recognize that, and so we're thinking about that in terms of what comes next, what comes after the doctoral training center. Is it for doctoral training? So how do we move forward in that way where we're serving the landscape as it stands now and where it's going to be in the future?
Okay. All right. Can we open the questions to the room? I think the question down here. If you could just say who you are and just wait for the mic, if that's possible. Just down here. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Jane Hotchkiss, Energy for the Common Good. And I'm going to term this in terms of global fusion, not just the UK. But one of the things that we're, as an NGO, we're encouraging is the wide range of jobs creation. So it's not just the highly skilled or even the highly engineering technical, but the different levels of line work. I mean, the entire lift, as we heard at the beginning of today, of electric build that we're facing with fusion as a part of it is tremendous. So it's not just for the plasma PhDs or the highly skilled engineers, it's for line workers.
Yeah.
It's for welders. And all of those jobs, many of them have left a lot of communities or weren't there to start with. So I don't know whether in the UK there are technical high schools, but that's a place in the US where sometimes it's a way of opting out of the assumed college or beyond because, not everybody is interested in that as their next step. And I'm just wondering where you see that. And just as a final point, I don't know whether you're seeing, and I'm staring at you, Kate, because one of our advisory committee members, Steffi Diem, has said the number of fusion fusion applicants now has just she's not seeing anybody who's interested in fission right now. She's seeing fusion, whereas previously there weren't jobs there. So ultimately, if you had a nuclear PhD, you were going to fission.
Okay, so I think there's two questions in one there. So the one's about how to encourage those technical skills. And the second one is actually we've got a lot of people wanting to go into fusion rather than fission.
I would want you to answer the first question, Chris, because I think you're best placed as the MTC chair to answer that bit of it.
Okay, thank you for putting me on the spot. At the MTC training, we offer apprenticeship programs at level 2, which is a GCSE level, level 3, level 4, and then working with universities in terms of applied degrees at level 6 and 7. And those are in general engineering skills, so that's mechanical, electrical, product design. We are looking at modules for different sectors, so both within the nuclear fusion sector, but also within space, because there's a lot of crossover between the two. those are mostly young people, but not all young people, who aren't going through the university system, and they're actually progressing their career upwards. So, but if there's any other comments?
No, I was just going to almost translate a little bit. The GCSE is technical high school for the folks that are not British.
Thank you, Jason, for
just
translating.
A translation there.
Thank you.
So it is the same, is the point that I'm trying to make. What Chris and that crew does in MTC and OAS is very similar to the vocational high school, technical high school in, for instance, the US.
Yeah. I think it's just fair to add as well that schools are really supportive of apprentices as well, and that's really, really grown in this country. You know, I think not everybody is academic or wants to go down the pure academic route, and lots of people do learn through hands-on practical learning, and I think there's more and more, you see it growing across quite a lot of industries now. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jackie. Any more comments?
Can I just carry on?
Sorry. Kate.
I think from a broader perspective as well, going back to what you were saying, is that it's not just that companies across, for example, the UK, are engaged in things happening in the southeast. It is when something is physically sited in the area where everyone gets to benefit from people giving you your bacon butty in the morning to, you know, the full range. So when we were doing some outreach in Goole for the Goole bid for STEP, which is 25 miles up the road from York, you know, it's quite a deprived place, typically had industry and it collapsed. They were really excited in general about the prospect of having something like this to give jobs, you know, to give benefits to the community. So the power of citing specific things in areas goes way beyond just having companies cited. I mean, which is great, but I think it's the power of having something physically there that uplifts the infrastructure and everything around it as well.
Okay. And just a question sort of related to that. How are we going to broaden the range and backgrounds of people that are coming into the sector? One of them may be to actually site them close to communities, but what other ideas are there for?
So I guess we're doing quite a bit of work in the CDT around who comes in, trying to break down barriers in terms of equity, in terms of how we advertise, how we shortlist, how we, you know, what our recruitment practices are, and checking that they're as fair and equitable as possible, and I think that has actually created a change in who we see coming into our program. That's really exciting. We're at the beginning of that journey, and I think more of that needs to happen. The more diverse your workforce, the better and more diverse the range of views are, you know, and that helps in all aspects, including, like the session before, about fusion justice and equity.
Okay, we've got a question online from Kerry, which is, what are the digital computing requirements for the fusion industry? What kind of computing roles are most needed? So, mathematical modelling, software development, machine learning.
It's all of that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all of that.
Anything in particular that we think is?
I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I would just say, think about what today looks like, and then imagine 20 years from today, and that's what's needed from a modeling, simulation type of thing. I don't think we should be constrained by what exists today. No, exactly. We need to be looking much further in the future for that.
I think it's about the capability to design entire fusion power plants in the digital space and try them out. And what is the physics and engineering under that, and checking that that's sufficient, you know, that's the next frontier, I think, because we can do bits and bobs, like, for example, the stuff I do, which is just a very, very small corner of the fusion world. There's no single code that will reproduce the physics that I want, so I have to sort of bolt stuff together, right? So, although I am an experimentalist, so I will confess that's not my strength, right? But I think, it's having a more holistic digital look at what this looks like.
Yeah, okay. Are there any further questions in the room at all? We've got two down the front here. If you can just wait for the mic and introduce yourself. Gentleman in the grey jacket here.
Hi everybody, my name is Andy Bates. I'm from Nuclear Southwest. So picking up on Jackie's point, I think there's a real challenge and a real opportunity for the fusion industry around skills, and particularly around starting at a young age with skills, getting into primary schools in particular, and really starting to change or get kids to think about how fusion could be for them, and particularly in communities where they've never even thought about that. When you go into some of these communities, like at Goole, like in South Wales, where you speak, they're not even thinking about engineering or even education. Yeah, so just going in there and enthusing them about fusion, it's an easy sell. I've been doing it for the last couple of years, and it's brilliant. One thing I've learned, and speaking to industrial partners around that, how do you get a more depth and breadth of skills? Where do you go looking for your skills over time? And seeing them going into the communities, quite often it stops at we need to get to the children. What I've seen is, no, you need to get to the families that are behind that and the generational change that you need, and the helping families to understand that their children, this is an opportunity for them, as opposed to, don't bother, it's them lot over there doing that. And I think that's where I think the real challenge is, and where the real difference can be made across the whole of the UK, whether it be with STEP or whether it be what the pioneers are doing in the private space as well. So that's what I'd love to see, and I think there's a great opportunity to do that.
Okay, so it's a comment about sort of getting to the parents and to the family. Any other comments on that?
So I would just highlight one of the programs that we run in our company is a STEM-based program whereby we go into schools at primary school, and it's a competition. We make it a competition, and it's more of a, how do you advertise this as the solution to the energy security issue or climate change issue, and it's create a poster, it's marketing material, it's something that sort of plays on the competition aspect a little bit and gets people excited. But I think, to your point, it sort of gets you beyond just that individual child and into the people that influence the child to help them develop something like this. So it's a longer running competition, and it helps get people more excited about it on a fundamental level, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've got quite a well-developed fusion outreach program associated with the doctoral training centre. We have money behind it. We see it as a really important thing to do, to engage with and have dialogue with the general public at large, especially kids. But yeah, one of the things is doing family events so that you can not only get the kids but their parents as well. And in fact, that was our approach with the information session in Goole. We actually just did a load of outreach, and everyone just had fun being a kid, playing with all the stuff, learning about physics. But then that led to lots of really interesting conversations with both the kids and their parents. And I think that's if you have something really exciting to engage with people as a talking point, then that's where the wider conversations start around, how's this going to benefit us? What's the risks? Yeah. So it's really interesting. It's a really powerful tool.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just literally just going to add on to that. I think the opportunity, particularly for the commercial industry, to have more open days as well. I think open days have been a thing, and particularly within sort of some of the public sector organisations, but certainly within the wider industry now, there is so much more going on. Having more open days and opportunities for people to see, and feel and sort of get more engaged, particularly the parents and wider communities, I think is really important.
Just a comment from me, just before we take the next question, is having a 19-year-old apprentice talking to kids, they actually relate really, really well. So, anyway. So, question down here.
This is maybe an observation, not more than a question, but you might comment. So fusion has been built up quite a lot by people with very long experience, especially in plasma physics and materials, decadal experience built on going to conferences, having time and space. The more commercial, aggressive approach, which is coming on us, and project-driven approach, tends to make that more difficult. And I guess there's a thought piece here about whether the industry has to accommodate and develop such people with decadal experience, or whether you have to develop designs and concepts and models which don't need that. So I think that's an observation, but you may or may not want to comment on it.
Okay, any comments on that?
My point, I think we just need to be efficient about whatever we do, and we only want the best ideas to come to the fore, and wherever they come from doesn't matter from a commercial point of view. If they're the best ideas commercially, they will be the most successful ideas. So they come from the most senior folks or the most junior folks, it doesn't really matter. It's a very, I think, egalitarian and meritocracy in that sense.
Could I just add, my point is that the senior folk, there may not be a supply chain of senior folk.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you know, the industry that's burgeoning in fusion wasn't created in a vacuum. It came out from everyone that started this, right? So there are deep links between those companies and the elder statespeople of our community, right? I think, you know, there are deep relationships in that way. There's crosstalk between those companies. And so, and, you know, UKAEA and RAL and the universities, and, you know, you see a little bit of crosstalk in terms of poaching as well, people going across and all sorts of things. So, you know, the fact that it is in a vacuum means there will be idea sharing and so forth. Now, I'm painting a rosy picture here. I know it's not always like that. I know that there's controversy and people don't bump along happily together. We know that, human's gonna human, right? So, but overall, I think, you know, there is that benefit because it's happened. Yeah.
Okay. Right, changing tack entirely, but it's a really interesting question which has come on from our audience online. Are changes in working patterns and employees' expectations post-COVID a challenge or an opportunity for Fusion? There's a question. Jackie, do you want to have a go at that one? I think it's a tricky question, but have a go.
Yeah, so I think, you know, I think we were all thrown into a situation that many industries hadn't experienced, and I think lots of positives came out of that, and negatives, obviously. But I think, you know, in terms of the ways that we work now, I think we've all had the opportunity to try different ways of working, and hybrid working is something that absolutely, you know, lots of companies have taken on and can make it work, maybe not in every role, you know, and I think you need to recognise what the business needs are and adapt to that. But I think, you know, there's been some really great opportunities to, you know, to support that, and it does also support sort of where you can pull from. You know, people can travel a bit further, they don't have to travel 5 days a week. So I think from that side of things, I think, you know, there are some positives that, you know, you can do anything from anywhere, you know, in many roles, and you can still collaborate. You know, we've moved on from a, you know, technology perspective in the way we work as well. So I think lots of positives from that side, but obviously some challenges as well, I think.
Just building on that point, do you think that we're now that much more used to actually remote working and remote collaboration? Do you think that's helped with accelerating development in Fusion?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because we were just getting to grips with mass kind of video conferencing, like, oh, mute, whatever, before COVID. And so actually, we're pros at that now, and we're far more likely to have a remote meeting like that and it be much more successful because we understand how to make it work. So from a just purely scientific collaboration point of view, it's been hugely beneficial, you know, for that kind of communication. But I also think hybrid working and remote working is essential for equity in terms of diversifying your workforce and who gets to do it. It's not necessarily tied to now a geographic location, and so that's great, and that should be exploited.
Okay. Any other comments?
I support all of what's been said. I think the one thing that I would say is that there are aspects that we need to build on and take advantage of and have the opportunity to develop in terms of the hybrid working. But I think we need to recognize that there are going to be some aspects of delivering Fusion or delivering a project will need to be in a more personal, face-to-face sort of situation. And we can't say all or nothing in this scenario. And it's important that we recognize we're going to have to adjust. And I think a lot still has to play out about what works and what doesn't work in terms of how we've been operating in the last 3 years, because I don't know that everybody has fully appreciated all of it yet. So still to be developed, I think. In the same way that Fusion industry needs to be developed, I think how we operate as a society in work still needs to be evolved. Okay.
But we all don't need to be in the same room together at the same time to make this thing happen.
Correct. Not all the time.
Not all the time.
Okay. Just a question coming online here. Refers back to a certain degree to a previous question we just had in the room. How do we capture the knowledge and experience from those in the existing nuclear fission sector and transfer this know-how to the developing fusion sector, especially around power generation and grid operations?
My perspective is very, very simple. Is there's no need to capture because they just work on a different project, doing the same exact thing that they have been doing for their entire career. It's not really that different. And that's the thing, again, it's a demystification of fusion in my mind. That's what it is. The nuclear fission is no different on the secondary side of the plant as a fossil plant, as a gas plant. It's all the same. It's going to be the same on a fusion plant. And so, again, it doesn't, there's no knowledge capture necessary because it's not going anywhere. It's not leaving. It's going to be with those people. That's a very simplistic view of it, but
I think there is a bit of knowledge capture in the sense of what happened with regards to engaging with people socially in terms of hearts and minds that happened during the time fission was rolled out. What can we learn? What can we do better so that when we're moving forward and talking about nuclear, that people aren't just going, ah, what the hell? Why are you doing this? You know, people need to, and we've, you know, STEP has demonstrated that there is buy-in, right? When you explain it properly and you engage with people and show the benefits. And so I think there's the learning we need to see, like, so I think that there's actually a whole chunk of social science that needs to be doing. Yeah. We're starting to investigate that area a little bit in our doctoral training centre. Actually, we've got a few social science and econ PhDs associated with our doctoral training centre to kind of explore those areas so that we're prepping now for when fusion arrives. It's pointless doing all of that work when we've got it. We need to do it now so that people are on board when it finally comes.
Okay. We've got a few minutes left, not too many, but we've got 3 or 4 minutes left. Are there any burning questions? We've got one halfway down here. Gentleman in the black, just here. If you can get a mic to him, that's all right.
So, hi everyone. Emma Pyack, Chemical Engineering Master's student at Imperial, so a little bit of a commute today. But we've heard throughout various panels today that the fusion industry is rapidly developing. With that in mind, for a graduate looking to make the most of this fantastic opportunity, could you maybe talk to what a career in fusion could look like in 5 or 10 years down the line?
Ooh.
Yeah, okay.
Me?
So
okay.
What does a career look like in 5 years' time, 10 years' time?
Well, I think, you know, like many organisations, you know, where this industry is growing so much, most industries are starting to now create career pathways, and I think the number of different career pathways is evolving, you know, very rapidly, which is really, you know, a really positive thing for the industry. You know, so depending on what you start in, I think you will find there'll be multiple options, whether that be in engineering or on the science side, or whether on the sort of more business operations side of things. You know, whether you want to sort of go down the technical route, whether you want to go down that sort of management route, whether you'd rather sort of focus on the kind of project management side of things. I think there'll be opportunity across the board within all the different kind of disciplines available. You know, we're certainly seeing that more and more. And then sort of even further down the line, you know, as we sort of transition even further, you know, more on the sort of manufacturing side, the construction, you know, the sort of numerous opportunities, I think, you know, and it is a really, really exciting time to join and be part of that and help shape that, because actually it is evolving, and you know, as we are starting to sort of plan what skills to grow within the business, we're seeing that there's so much more we can look at now, which, you know, wasn't necessarily the case, you know, 10 years ago. So it's really exciting.
I think one of the other things we haven't really mentioned is in 5 years' time, and maybe less than that, there'll be experiments that need to be operated. Yeah. And so people will be building experiments to solve smaller aspects of the fusion industry problem. And there's going to be a lot of jobs for people to operate those facilities and deliver those facilities. It's not the big fusion power plant, but in the shorter term, there's going to be facilities that are necessary to experiment and test different aspects that need to be operated, built, maintained, which we need people to manage and deliver.
Yeah. Okay. I think as well, there's been a bit of a bumper year in terms of records being set, breakthroughs, stuff like that. That's now permeating into the consciousness of funders and so forth. So, and just feeding into the sort of wider landscape of fusion, that's liable to lead to an uptick in opportunities for everyone across the board. You know, and even from my own area of inertial fusion, where we're on the cusp of ignition, right? In the next few years, you could be seeing a big result that could lead to development in that arena. That's very exciting to me. And just generally fusion at large. So as you start seeing these kind of milestones coming out, I think that's going to add little injections of opportunity more and more. And STEP is going to be a massive amount of opportunity as well in a practical sense. So there's I think, a bigger breadth of opportunity for people who want to go into fusion now than there has ever been, and I think that will be even more the case in 5 years.
Okay, well, we're going to have to stop. We're just getting to the end here. Sorry, Jackie. So I did pre-warn you I was going to do this. One final strapline as to why people should we need people in the fusion sector. What's going to compel them to join us? Quickly.
Fusion is the next generation.
Okay.
Yeah,
Jason.
Indeed, it has to be something that goes beyond 2050.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a game changer. It's got to be done.
Okay, so I think we're just out of time. So I'd like to thank our panel. So if we can thank our panel, thank you. Hopefully you can see the passion that the panel has shown and the audience here. So thank you very much, and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.